So good morning, everyone. As I said before, I don't know if you could hear me, but welcome. I see there's people from all corners of the world, which is very exciting. So we are here today to talk about, to participate in the Inclusive Open Government webinar series. It is a series we are very excited to have. It is an ongoing series, and this is our series or our piece today about applying a feminist open government lens to action plans. What does that mean? And we have a variety of experts here that are here to talk today from a variety of viewpoints on how that they think that how we can apply a feminist open government lens to action plans. I'll introduce our lovely speakers very soon, and please feel free. I'm going to try and make sure to answer as many questions and take note of many of questions as you have, so please comment them below. And if there's any audio or visual issues, please flag them to me right away, and we will do what we can to solve them, since this is we're doing it live. So, all right. So, my name is Jillian, and I currently work for the Open Government team here at Treasury Board Secretariat at the Government of Canada. So we are here in not so warm Ottawa today, a little bit warmer though, and not snowing, so that is very key. So I work a lot here along with my excellent colleagues on how do we apply GBA Plus to feminist or to open government, as well as working on feminist open government for the Treasury Board. So this year, as many of you know, if you don't know, then please feel free to check out this after the webinar. Canada is the government co-chair for the Open Government Partnership, and as such, we will be hosting the Open Government Partnership Summit along with Nathaniel Heller. And the three themes for this year are inclusion, participation, and impact. So there's a lot of really exciting and interesting things that will be happening for the summit. So please feel free to check those out all after, and it'll be in Ottawa in May. And if you are not able to join us in Ottawa in May to discuss these important topics, there will be some elements that you'll be able to join digitally as well. So one of the focuses that we're focusing on today is the inclusion. So if you can see the slides, which I hope you can all see, so one of our themes, or one of the our explanation of one of the sub-themes for this year is to empower underrepresented citizens, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, to engage actively with government. This allows for a more equitable government. And this is the gender-based analysis flower. So some of you might not have seen, and I know my lovely colleague off to the side here will come and explain this a little bit more in depth. This comes from the Status of Women Canada, and this is a really great explanation of gender-based analysis plus. So it's something that we use in Canada. It's an actual course. I believe you can take it even if you're not from Canada, and it's a really great explanation of how we do gender-based analysis, and we apply not just to the end of a plan, but how we work with gender-based analysis to help inform what we're doing in terms of a plan. So as you can see, there's lots of intersectional elements. If you're new to this space, you might not know what intersectionality is, but as you can see here, there is sex and there is gender, but there's lots of other intersecting elements that influence someone's lived experience and influence how someone experiences and perceives the world. So this is our guiding question today, and before I hand it off to Kosi, our guiding question is, how can we move towards a more inclusive and open model that ensures we work with and for underrepresented communities? So I will wheel out of the frame and let Kosi, my colleague here, wheel into the frame.
Okay, perfect. So I guess the presentation is going to go up by itself?
Yeah, it'll just take a minute.
Okay, so give me 1 second as the presentation loads.
Feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah. In the meantime, the first thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge that the land on which we're gathering here in Ottawa is the unceded and traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation. And I think this is something that's really important to do. Throughout my time in government, I've learned the importance of recognizing recognizing the position that we occupy, be it physically in terms of the land on which we stand, or the jobs that we do and how that positions us relative to other people. So my name is Kosi Sechkunebe, and I joined the Department for Women and Gender Equality about 2 months ago now. And I was born in Nigeria. I came to Canada when I was 5. I started working for government when I was a student, and I've been a permanent employee for going on 3 years now. All of these different elements of my identity, my race, my age, my gender, all affect the way in which I approach my work in policy. In particular, my work as a policy analyst is deeply informed by my interest in Black feminist theory, including intersectionality, as well as feminist standpoint theory. During this presentation, I'll explain how the government's use of GBA+ aligns with both of these theories to help advance the goal of a feminist open government. So, first and foremost, GBA+ is an analytical process used to assess how diverse groups of women, men, and non-binary people may experience policies, programs, and initiatives. The tool assists policymakers and evaluators in identifying how policies affect different segments of the population, helping to reduce or avoid unequal policy outcomes. The policy was initiated following the 1995 United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women, and in 2015, GBA+ assessments were made mandatory for all policy submissions brought forward before Cabinet and the Treasury Board. GBA+ is also embedded in annual departmental reports and in evaluations, and most recently in 2018, GBA considerations were made integral to the budget-making process. Okay, perfect. So the next slide is on GBA+ and intersectionality. So the plus in GBA+ acknowledges that this kind of analysis goes beyond biological sex and social cultural, i.e. gender differences, to incorporate different identity factors such as race, ethnicity, religion, age, and mental or physical ability. And this way, GBA+ is by nature intersectional, a term coined in 1989 by American critical legal race scholar Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. Intersectionality is an analytical framework that promotes an understanding of human beings as shaped by the interaction of different social locations, i.e. race, gender, indigeneity, class, sexuality, etc. According to an intersectionality perspective, inequities are never the result of human beings. Inequities are never the result of single distinct factors. Rather, they are the outcome of intersections of different social locations, power relations, and experiences. In other words, if we consider only one of these factors when developing policies or initiatives, we might find that we have dismissed the complex realities of any given individual. For example, in the working age group, i.e. 25 to 54 years, 76.4% of immigrant women participate in the labor force, compared to 83.6% of Canadian-born women. Both groups have lower participation rates than immigrant men, 89.8%, and Canadian-born men, 90.6%. Immigrant women are thus marginalized on the basis of their newcomer status, their gender, and oftentimes as well on the basis of their visible minority status, i.e. their race, their religion, and other factors as well. And in fact, actually, the children of immigrants from nearly all visible minority groups earn less than their Canadian-born peers. So the implications of these kinds of discrepancies go further than just the women, the immigrant women. Oh, okay. So the discrepancies that are affecting immigrant women actually go beyond them and start to affect their children as well. So GBA+ is something that's applied throughout the policy life cycle and should be used at all stages of the policy life cycle, from development to implementation. The starting point for conducting gender-based analysis plus is understanding that different groups may experience the same situation or initiative differently. In the first step of identifying the issue, it is important to ask questions around how the issue is being defined, as well as the gender and diversity considerations. Again, taking the example of immigration, in the Canadian context, gender differences exist across immigration categories. Women are migrating to Canada under all categories, but at different levels, which change over time. Appropriate use of gender-based analysis plus is allowing immigration, refugees, and Citizenship Canada to better understand what drives gender gaps within and across immigration categories, thus guiding funding and programming. Challenging assumptions is something that occurs throughout this process by pushing the users of the tool to be aware of their biases and assumptions, such as the assumption that Canadian immigration is gender or culturally neutral. The next step is gathering the facts, research and consultation. GBA Plus is an evidence-based process and encourages the use of data that has been disaggregated on the basis of sex, gender, race, indigeneity, and other identity factors. To advance this work, in 2018, the Government of Canada created a Centre for Gender, Diversity and Inclusion Statistics to act as a hub for such data. Another way of gathering data, this time qualitative rather than quantitative, is by engaging with impacted groups. I'll speak to this in a bit more detail shortly. Under GBA+, the results of research and consultations should inform options and recommendations at all stages of initiative development and implementation. Conducting a GBA+ enables analysts to identify differential impacts or unintended barriers associated with their initiatives and to then suggest mitigation strategies to strengthen the proposal. Again, going back to the immigration example, an example of a policy developed to address differential impacts is the new Visible Minority Newcomer Women Pilot Initiative, which aims to engage new partners on projects that specifically address the multiple barriers to labor market entry and career advancement faced by visible minority newcomer women in Canada. Okay. I'm getting some messages to slow down, so I will definitely do that. Thank you so much for flagging anything related to the presentation, including speed. That is something I'll definitely consider. I do tend to speak fast generally, so I'll try and work on that a little bit. So the next slide is on the value of inclusive engagement using GBA+. So as I mentioned in my quick introduction, GBA+ is well aligned with something called feminist standpoint theory, which argues that each person's unique social location gives them access to a unique perspective and form of knowledge that can benefit broader society. At its essence, GBA+ recognizes the complexity of each individual and takes a whole person approach to understanding how different aspects of an individual's identity can interact to affect how they experience and are impacted by various government initiatives. It recognizes the value and distinctiveness of individual perspectives and how they can shed light on more structural issues within society, such as racism, ableism, and other isms that denote power differentials and inequities. The use of GBA+ requires that the person using the tool assess how their identity shapes how they perceive an initiative and its target population. By promoting an awareness of biases, both negative and positive, GBA+ underscores the importance of moving beyond assumptions and instead engaging with target populations to better understand their needs. For example, centering immigrant women voices can help illuminate how women may be disadvantaged due to traditional gender roles, high childcare costs, and challenges presented by family reunification policy that all affect their labor market participation. These challenges also have broader implications for Canadian-born women, as well as immigrant men. If we neglect to consider the intersecting identity factors of diverse peoples, we risk not identifying potentially negative impacts prior to the development and during the delivery and evaluation of an initiative. Engaging early on and throughout the policy lifecycle, from issue identification to evaluation using GBA+, will ensure that the perspectives of a broad range of individuals, groups, and communities are captured. This provides valuable insights that can help identify potential gaps as well as opportunities for improvement. So GBA Plus and open government. There are strong linkages between GBA Plus and the government's commitment to open dialogue as part of open government. Considerations under the GBA Plus government public engagement principle of inclusivity align with GBA Plus considerations. These include engaging in a variety of locations, providing information that is clearly written in both official languages as well as other languages, providing information in alternative formats, designing processes with the target audiences in mind. Again, going back to the example of immigrant women, this could be making sure that there are childcare services provided, creating women-only spaces where these women feel comfortable sharing their experiences in an honest way, and working with community-based organizations that cater to the needs of these women. There are a lot of different things that we can do, and a lot of them are highlighted in this public engagement principle. Looking forward to not only inclusion, but the second theme for open government, i.e. participation.
Great. Thank you, Jillian, and thank you, Kosi, for that wonderful intro to GBA+. I think that was a really helpful foundation for this really important conversation. So my name is Allison Merchant, and I'm the Senior Gender Advisor for OGP, and I lead the Feminist Open Government Initiative. And so this is one of a number of different efforts that OGP is making this year in particular to really leapfrog a lot of gender initiatives within OGP's work. So we're really excited to host this OpenGov Week webinar and to share OGP's progress on gender to date, especially in partnership with the Government of Canada. So maybe just take a quick step back. We're talking about gender in open government today because we feel that opening up government is really an underexplored method for accelerating gender equality and closing really critical gaps in information, access, and participation. We know that women use public services, they access loans for businesses, they pay taxes, they walk on city streets. They really should have equal say in how governments provide those services. And importantly, when women and girls are absent from open government, so is the knowledge and skills that limit the potential of truly ambitious reforms. So this is critical to open government, and we want to get it right. And one last thing on this is just that equality and inclusion are really core to OGP. To join OGP, countries must commit to upholding the principles of open and transparent government by endorsing the Open Government Declaration. So I'm including just a quick excerpt from it here on the screen. But essentially, we value public participation of all people. And by public engagement, that has to include the full participation of women, because we know it increases the effectiveness of governments, which benefit from people's knowledge, ideas, and ability to provide oversight. So that's why we're here. However, while OGP has made some really great strides in the past years, women's participation and gender perspectives within OGP remains quite uneven around the world. As of the end of 2018, OGP had about 2% of our 3,000 commitments that specifically mention women or gender. So that's about 54 total commitments. We know that we can and must do better. So in 2019, we're calling on the partnership to be more intentional and strategic about how it brings women and girls into co-creation processes and implementation of commitments. So we do have a target goal, and you can hold us accountable, that at least 30% of OGP members take a concrete step to advance gender and inclusion this year. And we've just been circulating some guidance to points of contact that talks a little bit about what we mean by that. And I'll do a little bit of a really quick snapshot on 3 different streams of recommendations that we've shared with them. And we'll also share with you after this the slides so that you have all of this information. The first kind of track that we're asking points of contact and open government community members to consider is to make make co-creation more inclusive. So that can be a lot of different things, but thinking about expanding governmental consultations to other ministries, so engaging counterparts in gender and women's ministries who may not otherwise participate within an OGP co-creation process or conversation. There's also many governments now have governmental gender advisors in other ministries, and so bringing them in on really key policy areas would be an asset. Another really important step is to proactively invite and include gender organizations and women's networks to participate in consultations and multi-stakeholder forums across your action plans. So not just thinking about what specific commitment might be most applicable to a women's community, but saying we're working on commitments across transparency and water and education and data. What are the different ways that this impacts you and your networks differently? So we have representatives on this webinar from Open Heroines. That's a great example of a women's network that could be a great asset in the co-creation process. One thing to flag on that is just that we need to make sure that within those asks that we're taking into account hidden costs like childcare, as well as the time and day and location of forums, to make sure that those are really accessible to all. So one really quick example here is in Argentina. Argentina has been quite a leader on gender and open government. And one way that they've gotten to that point is that they have a gender-based CSO, is one of 4 civil society organizations that's currently at the National Open Government Roundtable. And they play a really key role in shaping the agenda for open government. And through that, have also worked in close collaboration with the National Institute of Women as well as the city to make sure that we're pulling in the best and brightest ideas from across open government. Another important track that we're asking participants to look into is how can they better gender mainstream their action plans? And this could be across action plans, or it could be very specific commitments if that's more applicable, but using tools like GBA Plus that we just heard about to review action plans, to think about the process of co-creation, to ensure that it truly does bring in an inclusive group of voices, an inclusive group of citizens. Other tools that can help with gender mainstreaming are tools like gender budgeting, so taking a look at how money is allocated to actually achieve a lot of these results and where and how they may impact men and women and boys and girls differently. And then the last thing to consider also is gender disaggregated data. So we know this is a place where we all have to do better. So within the context of your open government work, where and how can we really identify and disaggregate the data by the types of users who that reflects? So a couple of quick examples here. Kenya, for example, in their latest action plan, included amending a procurement rule that allows for 30% of public procurement opportunities to be set aside for women, youth, and persons with disabilities. This is really critical in that governments spend something like 1/5 of their budgets buying goods and services from the private sector, but about 1% of those are women-owned businesses. So it's a huge gap in terms of who was able to access those procurement contracts. And so by mainstreaming, you actually get an opportunity to take a larger scale open contracting commitment and make it work better for all people. Another good example is in Cote d'Ivoire, where they had a participatory budgeting commitment. And within that, they very specifically called out the efforts to engage women's groups as a target community for participatory budgeting to really help set those priorities and fund public services that responded to their needs. And so they made concerted efforts within that kind of much larger participatory budgeting effort to target and speak with a diverse group of women to guide those processes. And then lastly, the third piece of guidance that we're asking the partnership to consider are gender-specific commitments. This is something, a commitment that addresses or closes a gender-specific policy gap. And so looking for opportunities to use the open government platform to really advance gender equality. So that could be something, using it as an action platform for national or global gender equality pledges. So under the SDGs and under CEDAW, some of these larger guiding gender equality initiatives, there are a lot of commitments that governments have made to make improvements in policy. Open government could be a place where they take those commitments and turn them into concrete policy actions. So a couple of quick examples. In Germany, they use their action plan to conduct regular monitoring of the status of women and men in leadership positions in both the private sector bodies and public service. So they're going to use this kind of data collection and monitoring analysis to then design and implement a national act on equal participation of women and men in leadership positions. So it's a good opportunity to have a very specific effort that closes a gap in leadership. Additionally, in Argentina, one of our starred commitments, Buenos Aires has championed the inclusion of women and other gender minorities within their action plan, including one commitment where the city of Buenos Aires created an online platform to make it easier for women to find reproductive health services clinics. And it would list the type of services they could get, so whether it's contraceptives, and then users themselves, women in particular, could report back and say, this is the kind of service I got, or I asked for this type of medicine, I didn't get it. So it's an opportunity both to make that access more accessible, but also be able to identify gaps in service. And then the last thing I'll raise is in Sri Lanka, they used their action plan to look at the CEDAW commitment that they had to implement a gender quota. And so they then use their action plan as a monitoring and accountability mechanism to achieve a 25% local quota, specifically for women's participation in politics. So I know that's quite a few examples. I just want to include this last slide, and again, we'll share this with you afterwards, but this is kind of a summary of each of these different actions that we're asking the partnership to take. I know there was a question about how we intend to achieve this 30% goal, and we are working in close partnership with the support unit here at OGP to better identify and really promote these good examples that we have within action plans of where and how people can consider a gender analysis of their plans, what commitments are in creation this year that we can then refine and make into stronger, more ambitious gender commitments. And working on that in partnership with really great organizations and researchers who are helping us to build this evidence base around where and how this works better. So lots more to come. We'll speak about this consistently, I think, at the summit. And this is very much a starting point. So welcome other good ideas, other opportunities to really make sure we can accelerate this agenda within OGP. So with that, I will leave it here. I've also included my email address on the screen, and there's a link that we can share around afterwards that has a longer version of these different recommendations.
My name is Heidi Gansobre. I'm a government representative from Argentina, from the National Women's Institute, that it's called INAM for its acronym in Spanish. And there I lead the National Direction of Technical Advice, where last year, for the first time, we delivered two specifically gender commitments in the third National Action Plan of Argentina. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I feel very honored to be sharing this session with these admirable colleagues, really, so thanks a lot to the Government of Canada Open Government Program. I wanted to share with all of you our experience as a gender mechanisms in Argentina's third Open Government National Action Plan. But to do that, first I need to briefly introduce you to our current social situation in terms of the feminist movement and its impact on society in recent years. As previously it was said, Argentina had really good initiatives in terms of gender, and I think that's really related to the situation and the women movement agenda in the last year, since 2015 actually. So I don't know if all of you heard of the Ni Una Menos movement that was held in June 3rd, 2015 for the first time. That was the first march we saw, and it really was a breakthrough in Argentina for the feminist agenda in particular. In May that same year, we woke up here with the news of yet another woman killed, Yara Paez, who was just 14 years old, and sorry. Sorry, I had some problem with the presentation. There it is. And as I was saying, in May that year, another woman was killed, Yara Paez, who was just 14 years old, and she was pregnant, and she was murdered and buried in the backyard of her boyfriend's home. And that's when people said, really, it's enough. We can no longer stay indifferent to this situation and see how women and girls were being killed every day. And everyone gathered there in the first massive Ni Una Menos, not one woman less demonstration against gender-based violence, and it gathered 300,000 people in front of the National Congress and in major cities around the country too. That march was organized by journalists, NGOs, and joined by artists and also renewed personalities. So it really was an unprecedented event since the return of democracy in Argentina. There was never a march this size and with such an impact. It's like everyone was there, or if they were not in the march itself, they were uploading photos with the Ni Una Menos sign. And so we feminists couldn't believe that was happening. We were thrilled with the idea that now everyone at least heard about what we and our feminist procedures had been fighting for so long. I still shiver actually when I remember that day. But it was really an absolute breakthrough that really put the feminist demands into the public agenda. So later that year we had general elections, and in December we had a feminist at the head of the National Women's Institute, Fabiana Túñez. My actual boss, she was a former executive director of La Casa del Encuentro NGO, an organization that at that time delivered the only femicide records of the country. So it was really important, and it was one of the main demands actually in Ni Una Menos that we had, that the government had official records of the feminicides. And now we have it thanks to that. I myself was part of that first observatory of femicides in Argentina. It is called Adriana Maricel Zambrano, as well as my colleagues in the INAM now, and we joined Fabiana's team since that time in the government. Now you will say how this relates to open government. Well, this unprecedented movement, women's organization gained a lot of weight and visibility, and when the National Open Government Program started the consult process for this third National Action Plan, they received demands on gender issues that were after brought to us. And well, fortunately, having the head of the Institute a strong commitment with transparency and democratic values that allow us to present our two commitments in open government. At that time, we had already presented our National Action Plan against violence against women, and we were starting to think in our Equal Rights and Opportunities Plan. The demands that rise in that consult and were brought to us were related with child care and adult care, gender gaps, and we noticed that many of the demands were related really with public policies that had to be included in the Equal Rights Plan. So we delivered the commitment that consisted in participatory drafting of the action plan. This inclusion in the Open Government Plan really helped us with the process that we had to face afterwards. You know, we had to sit with our government counterparts, like in the Health Ministry, Labor Ministry, and we knew that we had the support of the civil society in these demands. We were not alone asking for them to commit because, you know, in a national action plans for equal opportunities, we had to commit all government counterparts. It's not the institute itself, but also all the ministry. And fortunately, we could do that. We were able to do that, but really it was a key issue to have the support, and we knew that not only in the streets these things were being said, but also in the process itself of open government, where, as it was said, we had some major NGOs that work actively in women's issues and women's rights that were following all this process. So we were able to do all these meetings with different counterparts, with open meetings too, with the society in general, with the NGOs, and that way we were able already to present the national action plans for equal rights and opportunities that actually is the first of its type in Argentina. Actually, we were the only country in the region, in Latin America, with only Cuba also, that didn't have a plan of these characteristics. So you can imagine really the importance of this fact. And that first plan was already presented last December by the president himself. So it was a really important time. I have in the presentation some pictures of the different meetings we were able to accomplish, and that picture is of the presentation of the plan itself. You can see the president of Argentina, Mauricio Macri, sitting in the right in Olivos government house. And the other one, it's a draw, because we have a drawer there while we were presenting it that was drawing all the ideas, so it was really interesting. So that was the first commitment in that action plan, and at the time we assumed this commitment, we had already presented the National Action Plan to Prevent, Assist, and Eradicate Violence Against Women 2017-2019. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, great. As I said, we had already presented that first plan, and that National Action Plan was one of the main demands, actually, of Ni Una Menos movement, So really, when we assumed this new commitment in government in the National Women's Institute, we had really short time to deliver this plan because the society was so actively asking for it. So at that time, the process didn't have as many time as we had with the Equal Rights Plan to do these open sessions and consultants, but we knew it was asked by New Menos movement, and it was asked in the streets, as I said. So we wanted to have a different process for that plan. But with the plan itself, we wanted to be able to do this, and was asked by the civil societies that are taking part in the open government process, that it's to monitor this process with them. So first of all, I have to say this helped a lot also with our other counterparts, because having there the civil society watching every step you're making in this plan has also a different weight. So we were able to do some gathers and some meetings with civil society counterparts as well as government, as you can see in the pictures. And then the most interesting is that using the platform Trello that you may know, we were able to have a special page there for the Institute for all the other government counterparts to acknowledge what they were doing every step, and that way we accomplish a public monitor of that action plan. So it was a really enriching experience, and it was really interesting to see really how gender-based analysis was able to help in all this process of gender mainstreaming. Really, for us, for INAM, it was a really good experience to work really close with the open government team, and that's why we were very happy to share this experience with you. And well, if you have any questions, I'll be able to answer it later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, this is Sarah Orton-Vipon from Development Gateway, and I'm a member of Open Heroines. I'll be talking a little bit about Open Heroines and who we are, and then I'm going to pass it off to Jamila, who will speak a little bit about her experience. Okay, so we are a group of 500 women, and growing actually. We're all volunteers from across the globe. We work in the fields of open government, open data, civic tech, and we're women that work at the national level, subnational level, and internationally. The group was born in 2015 at the OGP Summit in Mexico as a space for women to support each other. Today, we're an informal, safe space, so mostly on Slack, but we do meet up in person, where women share experiences, get advice, promote job opportunities, share our work, organize events to amplify voices of women and their work. And then we also see ourselves as a watchdog in open spaces. So we're not a legal entity, and we have women from a variety of backgrounds and different points in their careers, which makes us pretty diverse and inclusive. So the challenge that we see is that the goal of open government is improving the way in which government responds to the needs of its citizens by encouraging active, equal, inclusive citizen participation. But open government spaces are male-dominated, from thought leadership to government to civil society. If this is an open space, we need to make it open, as in more inclusive and welcoming for different people and opportunities. Open Heroines believe we need to be seen and heard. The OGP 2016 Paris Summit had 37% women to 61% men. The International Open Data Conference in 2015 had 34% women to 66% men. So we see our role as really calling out the limits on how open communities operate and how and also who they engage with. Unfortunately, harassment, discrimination, and misogyny still persist in the open government community. And as we know, the problem continues no matter the sector. So as a safe space, we promote women's voices and understanding in this area. So our mission and desired outcomes is to bring more diversity and a gender lens to the open government, open data, and civic tech spaces. We think a feminist perspective will lead to more inclusive programming and stronger social change, which is obviously quite similar to the beliefs of Feminist Open Government Initiative. We aim to increase the number of women that are involved in the open government and open data, open community, in particular women from the Global South and young women. We aim to amplify the voices of women and genderqueer people in this space, and we also aim to develop a new generation of leaders through professional development opportunities for women and genderqueer people in our fields. So last year we received funding by the Hewlett Foundation, financially housed in Development Gateway, for Open Heroines to provide travel grants and support conference participation in 2018 and 2019. So here we have Open Heroines, including at IODC in Buenos Aires in 2018, including 14 new heroines. So the objective of the travel grants is to increase conference attendance, supporting a new generation of women and genderqueer people to participate in critical global events, proactively bringing first-time women to global conferences. So we provide a travel bursary fund to pay for flights and hotels to conferences. And after returning, women become ambassadors to burgeoning open movements and are supported by a new network of global women in the field. For IODC 2018, we provided over 15 travel grants and are aiming for over 10 in Canada. Here's another photo of Open Heroines at Buenos Aires. So another element is that we host gender-focused events. At OGP Paris, we held the Open Gender Monologues, in which we shared often difficult stories of women working in the space. We host workshops and sessions, including at MozFest 2018 and TICTEC 2019 upcoming, where we talk about the challenges women face in open spaces. We hosted a do-a-thon at IODC 2018, where we connected people from a wide variety of skills and experiences together to work on spotlight gender issues, including the city of Buenos Aires and more sectorally looking at the natural resource transparency work. At OGP 2019, we'll be hosting a Skillshare where we'll be matchmaking Open Heroines and friends of Open Heroines to share or learn skills around applying a gender lens, improving storytelling skills, fundraising, communications, things that we know are often not included in the feminist conversations, but are really needed among feminist groups. Here's a photo of the do-a-thon in Buenos Aires. And finally, before I turn it over to Jamila, our lesson so far is that there are hundreds of qualified women ready to join the conversations. And this includes women from large, well-known organizations. So before you buy your plane ticket to Ottawa, consider if there is someone else in your organization that could be represented and represent your organization well, especially young women, especially women coming from the Global South. And finally, gender inclusion takes work, proactive work, but it's not that hard. So please do so. And then finally, keep in touch with Open Heroines. If you want to join, reach out, follow our blog, follow our Twitter, and send us an email. Over to you, Jamila.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, very much. My name is Jamila from Ghana, and I received a travel grant from Open Heroines to attend the International Open Data Conference in Buenos Aires, Argentina last year. So I'm just going to be sharing my experience in that whole process and how everything ended up. So I'm part of a data community here in Ghana, and I got to know about Open Heroines through David Opoku, who is currently the Data and Partner Support Manager at Open Contracting. As a first-time traveler to an international conference, there were a number of challenges that I faced, especially when I got accepted to receive the grant to go to the IODC in Argentina. Firstly, for Open Heroines as an organization, there were limited funds, and they wanted to get as much women to the IODC as possible. So they had to ensure that they were allocating the funds in such a means that it would be enough, or it would cover majority of the expenses that women like myself and others would incur. So they cover the flight and hotel costs. And then besides that too, there wasn't enough time between the time the travel grants were available to when the conference was actually taking place. So there was a bit of difficulty in trying to get visa. Myself, for example, we didn't have an Argentina consulate in Ghana, so I had to travel to Nigeria within 2 days after knowing that I was eligible to get a visa, then come back to Ghana, and then after a day get on a flight and then move to Argentina. It was very hectic, and it was also a bit of a financial strain, but due to the help of people who supported me in all of these endeavors, I was able to sail smoothly and get everything in place before finally going to Argentina. I'd want to say that for me, because of the support I got from people here in Ghana and as well as the Open Heroines community, things were a bit difficult, things were a bit easier for me, and with determination and grit, I was bent on making it to the IODC. But for there might be other ladies out there who might not have received the same support that I got, and might be doing amazing works in the fields of like civic tech, open data, and open government, but might not have the necessary support it takes to get out there and to also be a voice and to partake in international engagement and conversations on whatever field that they may be doing. So I'll just end by thanking Hewlett Foundation again so much, and also encourage other organizations and funders to support causes such as that of Open Heroines, to reach out to more women, especially from the global south, to join in this kind of conversations. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to Jamila and Sarah. It's really great to see folks from all over the world kind of being involved in this movement. I guess the two things that really stood out to me is that women are ready, as we can see, and there are over 500 women, my goodness, who are involved in this space and have the competencies. So that's super excellent to remind ourselves that I often feel sometimes we can feel like we're the only one in our organization, but there are 500 other awesome women around the world who are ready to cheer you on and support you. So thank you to Open Heroines for making sure this space is available for us to coordinate, as well as Sarah, I really liked your comment about gender inclusion takes work, but it's not that hard. I'd like to highlight that too for those who are like, oh my goodness, this is new to me, or I've never done this, or this is like square one. It does take work, but it's not that hard, and there are small things that you can do to make sure that you can move towards this direction. So I know that some of you might have to scoot off, but let's maybe take 10 or so minutes to address some of these questions. Let me see. I will ask the speakers independently. So I'll say your name just so you can listen. And it might take a couple seconds for us to mute, unmute, do all that stuff, so bear with us. But I will try to ask each of the speakers a question, and if you're able to keep it quite quick, that would be excellent, or a combination of questions if possible. So the first question will be for Kosi. Is it possible to get more information on the GBA approach? I know we had included that. And I know we had talked about specific tangible examples on that front, so I can address that part. And there was a third question I saw too that I'll get Kosi to address about if GBA Plus, I think, was being used in other countries in its current form. So for Danielle, who I know had to scoot off, the action plan does have tangible commitments, i.e. this webinar, i.e. the summit. So we have a Feminist Open Government Day, as well as we'll be having a Feminist Open Government Toolkit that will be coming out for public feedback, and we'll definitely send that around in some way or another. Or check our Twitter, check the Open Heroine Slack channel. It'll definitely be there. So we'd love for you to comment and participate in that process. And I'll hand it over to Kosi for her question on if it's being used in other countries.
So the question around whether or not GBA Plus is being used in other countries, GBA Plus is a kind of gender and diversity lens. So different countries may have their own different approaches. GBA Plus is the way in which the government of Canada is branding the gender and diversity lens. And what's unique about it is the way in which it's pushing that intersectionality lens. So really going beyond just gender and giving a lot of consideration to race, ability, and other identity factors that are compounded and really affect the way in which people navigate relationships, policies, and so on. Another thing is how GBA Plus, a little bit more information on how it operates. So GBA Plus is integrated throughout the policy lifecycle. So as mentioned in my presentation, we're developing guidelines for the beginning, so really engaging with people from the get-go. So there are going to be firm guidelines and kind of best practices on how to do that. And then the next step, and that should help with issue identification and feed into all of the policy development process. But at the same time, once you get to the memorandum to cabinet stage, there are guidelines as to how to conduct the assessment. So some questions, some documents that you have to fill out. It's now a mandatory aspect of any memorandum to cabinet, so it's integral to the policy making process. You have to show how you've considered these gender and diversity considerations and how they've affected the recommendations that you're putting forward. GBA Plus is also deeply ingrained now in the federal budget making process. There was actually an act that was passed recently to make it a legal or legislated requirement. And then
yeah, absolutely. So very quickly, and this is definitely worth another conversation and a webinar in days to come or weeks to come. But certainly the IRM, who is the kind of internal review mechanism that assesses action plans and says, did you do what you thought out to do? Was it ambitious? Did it have impact? And so we are working with them to think through what are some ways in which we could standardize some gender metrics within that. As it is currently, if there's a gender or sexuality tag within an action plan, then they do assess whether or not it did what it was seeking to do. But otherwise, there's not a consistent kind of metric across them. And so that is something that's very much on our radar, and we're working through a number of different kind of internal guidance and rules changes that may or may be able to help us with addressing some of these on a much more consistent basis. And I think just one last thing to mention in terms of the 30% goal. So there's a full-scale effort this year, like I said, on gender. I think it's everything from the summit and the conversations we'll be hosting and provoking and tools that we'll be highlighting as part of that summit so that people walk away with some really strong skill sets on how does one do a gender-based analysis or how does one gender budget in the context of open government. So it's very, as Sarah said, it's it takes some work, but it's not hard. And so having a little bit of support to be able to do that themselves. We're also dedicating time from staff and others to support people in the co-creation process. And then looking at additionally for opportunities where action plans are already created and underway, how do we make sure that implementation is as inclusive as it could be? So a number of different pieces that will be supported by ongoing research that's funded by IDRC and the Government of Canada to really help us understand what are the kind of key levers within gender and open government, and thinking specifically about areas like open contracting and natural resources governance. Where are a couple of different places where we could or should be investing some time and some efforts to make sure that we are being as thoughtful as possible about bringing women into the process, but also bringing that gender perspective into these really core thematic areas.
You have to show how you're taking those considerations into account when you're actually developing your initiatives. So the design of the initiative has to take into account the fact that people have different considerations, will be impacted and have different requirements in order to be able to really benefit from.
So we have a couple more questions for Sarah. One is, can Open Heroines support women's organization participation at the EITI Global Conference in Paris in June 2019? And last one is, they're very much excited to learn new ways of how they can incorporate Open Heroine right away in their national action plan. So if you can say a little about that.
Cool. So regarding the EITI conference participation, I think that I know that for sure that there are women who are open heroines that are involved in natural resource governance. So do you know who asked this one?
Lena.
Okay, Lena, I actually just saw your email in the Open Heroines email. So once we have people in the Slack channel, we can just follow up from there, because I think that there could be a really good conversation following, especially given the work that we've already done talking through some of the natural resource governance issues around gender. And then the other one is, I think that we could probably help regarding the National Action Plan. I think the best way that Open Heroines works is we kind of help to match people up with where there are specific questions and skills. So I think if there are particular questions around the action plan and you're able to float them to the Open Heroines community, we can kind of gather around and figure out some people to talk through or to match you up with to get some answers.
Perfect. Back to you, Jillian. It seems like we're having some audio trouble, so I am going to go ahead and wrap up the session. So we have reached the end of our webinar. On behalf of Open Government Partnership and the Government of Canada, we would like to thank our speakers for your great presentation and useful insights and the time to join us. Also, many thanks to all the participants who joined us today. Again, you will be sent a copy of the PowerPoint and a link to the recorded webinar, so you may share it with your networks and you can go back to it for other information that you may have missed. So stay tuned for the future OGP webinars invitation, and I believe we have one more with the Government of Canada on inclusion of Indigenous communities. So you can look forward to that on April. Thank you.